G'day ladies and gents, and welcome to War Thunder. Patch 1.85 is slowly coming out to be one of the most in-depth patches in War Thunder's history, with Italian tanks, the M3 Bradley, and now supersonic aviation. Now, for me personally, as a pilot first, I am more interested in the supersonic aviation, and as a result, that's what I'll be grinding out first, and that's probably what you'll see on the channel first. But as someone who has recently steered away from top-tier jets as such, and much prefers lower-tier jets or perhaps high-tier props as well, even in tanks, it seems to be that case, I have some tips, I guess, or some pointers or suggestions even, for War Thunder's developers, Gaijin, to implement these before the patch, because we still have a few more days until the patch is predicted to drop, and I would really like to see what they could do with some of these ideas. Most of these revolve around jets and perhaps quote-unquote fixing them, but I don't think there is a single fix, and I don't think there is any way to achieve perfect balance in War Thunder, and in fact, in any game. So let's get right into it. My first tip would be to decompress the battle ratings, or at least include a more diverse spread. So at the moment, planes like the CL-13, MiG-17, Hunter, and F-2 and F-25, and the F-40 and the F-35 tend to dominate the meta of 9.0 jets. Basically, more so the Sabres, simply because they can pull energy out of their arse, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Essentially, this creates a massive power gap at the top, and 8.0 really doesn't stand a chance. On top of that, 8.0 rarely sees a down tier, if at all, and when it does, it gets absolutely clobbered. So what I would recommend to Gaijin is move those top jets up to 9.3, even before the patch, or on patch day, so that we don't end up with an absolute clusterfuck of 8.0 jets getting dominated by perhaps 9.3 Javelins and F-100s. We'll see how it happens on the patch, but I don't like to speculate, but that is a real possibility. So if we have a greater battle rating spread, we have a more diverse matchmaker, and as a result, we have more people playing things that are not the meta, which encourages old players to come back to jets. And not only that, people generally come back to War Thunder for a patch and then leave a couple of weeks later and go and play some other games that they find more interesting. And a way to sort of spice up those players and to encourage them to stay is to have them realize that the matchmaker is getting better, and the meta is no longer Sabres. Which brings me to my second point. Buff everything else that's not a Sabre. Now, as I understand it, the Hunter and the MiGs currently have a slight hindrance on their instructor, which basically means that it's a lot harder for them to rip. Harder to rip their wings, harder to overspeed or stuff like that. What I suggest is that they are removed. Basically, make it easier for the MiGs to rip their wings, but give them greater turning. Same for the Hunter. Make it easier to turn, and it will bleed more energy, which means that no one's playing at 1100 kilometers per hour anymore. Everyone's sort of playing at, say, 700 to 900 kilometers per hour, which not only makes it easier for the jets that are of a lower BR, because they can start to use their speed in dogfights to clean up enemies, but it also means that no one's playing like a bunch of pussies, where everyone's sitting at 1100 kilometers per hour and the fastest jet wins. Not only that, but if the MiGs were to get some proper energy retention and have their advantage at altitude perhaps more pronounced, obviously within reason and obviously within the datasheets. But if that were to happen as a general idea, the MiGs would be able to play the energy, the Sabres would be able to play the roll rate and the horizontal, and the Hunters would be able to play energy and altitude. And it would sort of mingle, and it would be a much better, more all-rounded matchmaker. Whereas at the moment, you've got Sabres who play their speed and energy, and the MiGs who play their turn and energy, and everything else gets left behind. Literally everything else gets left behind. A Hunter can't accelerate fast enough. The Panthers are absolutely useless because they can't exceed like 900 kilometers per hour without going into a dive. The Mystère, the Oregon, the Vautour even, it's all these planes are absolutely useless at the moment. People have no reason to play them. So if they were at a more suitable battle rating, and they were a bit more suitable as planes in general, performance-wise, then I see that as a big win for Gaijin, because people will come to the patch, they'll play the Javelin, they'll play the F-100, they'll play the MiG-19, and they'll have fun, they'll spade it, they'll have their ace crew, or they'll just unlock it in flight for a few games. And then they'll go back and realize, oh, would you look at that? The jet matchmaker is a lot better. The planes perform a lot more enjoyably. The meta isn't stale. There's more to do. And as a result, players will stay, and players will maybe buy premium. Maybe they'll play the events and buy event tickets or buy stuff on the marketplace, a nice skin perhaps. And that's not only revenue for Gaijin, that's also revenue for the players, that's a win-win situation for queue times, squadrons, you name it. Literally no one loses. And pretty much all that has to be done is a couple of adjustments in battle rating. So for example, I would put the non-BIS MiG-15 at 8.7, debatable A5 Sabre at 8.7, the Mystères at say 8.3, 8.7, and overall, the matchmaker will flesh out, and it'll be a lot more nicer. You'll get more up tiers, more down tiers at 8.7 and at 7.7 and 8.3 and 7.3, and overall, everything is just going to be more enjoyable. This afternoon, I played a match in my Meteor Arcade, and I found that I was down-tiered for a once-in-a-million opportunity. Although, admittedly, now that the battle ratings have been spread out, the MiG-9s are at 7.3, the Oregon and the Baragon are at 7.7, and the G91 Pre is at 8.3, and the R1 is at 9.0, which is fantastic change. Well done on that one, Gaijin. I'm glad you took my advice on that. Maybe not only my advice, but of course, I feel like as a content creator, there's a bit of a push from content creators to get some change, which is most of the time somewhat successful. Now, I think if those alone were implemented, we would have some really, really good opportunities for people to stay, and people to play, and people to pay. So Gaijin, if you're listening, I hope you do at least these. Now, a couple of other smaller changes would be small game mechanics. Now, I understand from the devblog that there were announced that there would be some extra game mechanics for the missiles themselves and the combat revolving around the missiles. But in general, for air realistic, you can argue that the meta has been quite stale. Now, Fly Daily recently tweeted out that he was really excited for these new jets, but he was also really excited that he would be playing the same game modes and the same meta all over again for the millionth time. Now, he has a really good point there. He's not 100% correct, because personally I believe that ARB isn't about the maps, isn't about the game modes as such, but it's more about the dogfights and the air combat. Personally, for me, ARB has never been about draining tickets from the enemy team by killing ground targets, although that is surprisingly therapeutic and surprisingly enjoyable. It's not about bombing the bases, which is extremely brain dead and not fun at all, but I believe it's about the dogfights, because that is where the most exciting part of this game mode happens. In 1v1s, 2v2s, 2v1s, at altitude, on the deck, over the water, over the mountain ranges in Korea. that is where the most enjoyable part of War Thunder ARB is for me. Now, there is, in my opinion, no single way that you could add to that. There is no way that you can add to the dogfights, perhaps at the minimum by including more, but then that you open up a bit of a Pandora's box there, a bit of a can of worms, I guess. Would you add AI? Would you add extra players? What would that do to the servers? What would that do to the matches? Would people just farm AI all day? You never know. So I think it's easier for Gaijin just to keep that the same, but to add a couple of little extra things for that late game when you only have a couple of players left, and maybe you've got a bomber, and maybe you've got an attacker, and a couple of fighters. So you could use them perhaps to kill tanks that have spawned from a base, or paratroopers that are coming in and repairing an airfield, or something small like that, which gives the enemy maybe a boost in tickets or a loss in tickets or whatever. There's a really, really good video by the European Canadian who basically talks about this stuff for, I think, a good half an hour. I'll link it in the description. It's a really good video. I recommend that everyone checks that out, including Gaijin, which I'm sure they've seen. But by adding all these extra little things, it adds a little bit of spice and encourages people to come back to ARB. Now, obviously, dogfighting is not for everyone. Ground attacking might be for some people. So perhaps let's go with an idea where the bombing bases at the beginning of every match spawn tanks, light tanks, every 20 seconds. And they go on their way, or an armored car or something really fast that goes on their way to capture a zone, and that zone is 1,000 tickets. That gives everyone a little bit more opportunity to drain tickets if someone's climbing to space or camping their airfield or something like that. And it brings back the action in ARB. It forces people to either leave their airfield and stop playing passively, or leave that high altitude position that they've taken and perhaps risk it all to save their game. And I think just little things like that, little things, would be absolutely perfect for rank 6. And now that rank 6 is actually coming, this is the best time to do that, because people are going to come back to ARB. People are going to come from other games. They're going to notice that ARB is a little bit stale. They're going to play like maybe 20 games and see, oh, well, I'm still doing the same thing over and over again. And obviously some variation with each map would be ideal. But there's a bit of a creative license there. And personally, my recommendation to Gaijin would be take on the content development that other players have made. So if a player makes a really nice map, or makes like a really nice mode in a map, take it on, give it a go, put it in the dev server, see how it goes, and you never know, maybe it would make it to the live game. But there's so much potential, so much that can possibly happen, and whether or not Gaijin takes that is an entirely different thing. I understand if they don't take things, because perhaps they're not up to scratch, or they haven't thought about it hard enough. And I don't doubt that there are some situations like that that are already in that space where perhaps we are getting paratroopers that repair airfields. But, it's not going to come to the game just yet because they've got to figure out a couple of things. But if there isn't, I think now is the perfect time to give it a go. A lot of people are going to be on this dev server. By the way, I would personally recommend you keep an eye on the forums. And I would recommend that Gaijin gives us a couple more days' notice, because every time I get an email from Gaijin saying that the dev server is going to be up, it's normally half an hour before it happens, and I'm in bed, because it happens at 3 a.m, and it's really, really bad timing for me. Now, I know a lot of people in Europe and in the US will not be in that situation, but I would still recommend to Gaijin that they at least give us a day's notice. I understand that things get ready at the last minute and there are still bugs and there are still things that need to be ironed out. But if it's possible, even put it back a couple of days, maybe a week or anything, just to give us a bit more time to prepare everyone, perhaps to let everyone know on Twitter, on YouTube, to prepare streams, to set aside, say, work or other commitments, because there is a lot going for this game. And I honestly think a lot can happen, and a lot of good can happen. All we really need to do is either get Gaijin on board with this, which I'm sure they are in a couple of ways. Give them a little bit of encouragement, and obviously ask nicely. We did get our way with parts and FPE for now, but we were nice about it. We weren't angry, and everyone sort of came through, and everything seems to be going okay. Everyone's calmed down. So if everyone just takes a bit of time, steps back, asks politely, perhaps gives good reasons. If you're putting in a suggestion in the forums, do it completely. Make sure you read everything. I've talked to a couple of moderators, some forum moderators and game masters and stuff like that, and they've said that plenty of people haven't done that and they get angry. And it's no fault of the game masters or forum mods. So we have some good ideas here. And a lot of the community has some good ideas. So let's take them to Gaijin. Let's hope that they perhaps take notice. Let's hope that they maybe listen. I'm sure they will. Let's hope for a really interesting and really, really enjoyable top tier rank 6 aerialistic battle. Thank you guys for watching. I don't normally do this, but I recommend that you share this video and just, share it around with your friends and tell them, hey, maybe this guy's got some good ideas. Maybe we can build on these ideas. I really recommend that because at the end of the day, it's not just about me. It's about the community. And if we can band together as a community and come up with some cool ideas, you know, you never know. Maybe we could get them implemented in the game. Anyway, guys, take care, and I'll catch you next time. Cunts.